4 down, 4 to go. The Denver Broncos coaching search is halfway done, and they are rolling. And so is the DNVR Broncos podcast. We are rolling as well, and welcome into the DNVR Broncos podcast. I'm your host, Zach Stevens, joined by my guy, Henry Chisholm. We're back, Henry.
We are so back, and as I feel like I've said before, I'm pretty excited about where this coaching search is right now. I think early on, I mean, it's easy to get excited about Jim Harbaugh or Sean Payton. Like, maybe you don't think they're the perfect candidates, but compared to most coaching searches, those are some pretty good candidates.
Yep.
At this point, though, I really think that this is just a totally wide open race. Nothing would really surprise me at this point.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. That's kind of juicy there, Henry. And this Broncos podcast is brought to you by our friends over at DraftKings Sportsbook.
Yes,
the Broncos coaching search might be brought to them by Walmart, but this one is presented by DraftKings Sportsbook. And if you use the code DNVR over at DraftKings Sportsbook, you will turn $5 into $200 in free bets by placing a $5 bet on any NFL wildcard game this weekend. And if that team wins, you get $200 in your account for new users. So that's the best way to get going. We had some technical difficulties the first time we went on live on this show, but now we are live. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Hit us with a thumbs up if you're tuning in live. Hit us with a 5-star review if you're tuning in on iTunes. Those really, really help us, and you all have been crushing it this week, so we can't thank you guys enough. And we're having some technical difficulties on the video side, but don't worry, we're working on those right now. Until then, you can look at David Shaw, who the Broncos interviewed yesterday. And Henry, I said his name, and a smile came on your face. I think there might be a reason why you have now opened up this search to just beyond Jim Harbaugh and Sean Payton. Is it because David Shaw?
It doesn't hurt because I don't know.
There we go.
Hey,
now you
us.
can see us.
I have no idea where he fits in. If we come out of this and the ownership group says that they like him the best, I can't be too surprised. Like, they all know him well.
Yeah.
They all have ties to Stanford. Like, David Shaw has done some great things in the past. We'll get into all the details later, but if they say this is the guy, that wouldn't surprise me. If they say, no, actually, it's Sean Payton is our clear number one, and we still like him and Jim Harbaugh and Dan Quinn, and those are kind of the top three, and David Shaw's somewhere else, like, again, that wouldn't surprise me either. And so this really does feel like everything is starting to get jumbled up a little bit. But I do think that David Shaw is a pretty good candidate.
Well, and that's a good thing, right?
Yep.
If other guys are starting to jump in where you say, oh, maybe there's not a clear 1 and 2. Maybe there's someone else that's able to push. That would be a really good thing, especially because I think the clear 1 and 2s in this are really good candidates and viewed like that, viewed as high-profile candidates around the NFL. So let's jump into David Shaw. And first, let's set a 3-minute timer to break down exactly who David Shaw is. Because like you said, Henry, I'm kind of with you. I think he could end up being a big-time player, maybe even get a second interview, be down to the final 3 or 4. So let's jump into David Shaw. I'll start off. David Shaw, connections. That's where I start with David Shaw. He has connections all throughout this Broncos coaching search. He, of course, has connections with Kerry Walton Penner and Greg Penner. They both went and got their MBA at Stanford. He was the coach at Stanford. You look at Condoleezza Rice, also big-time connections to Stanford, not just working there, but also she works with recruits, has done that in the past. And then another big-time connection, Jim Harbaugh. David Shaw coached with Jim Harbaugh at the University of San Diego for David Shaw's last season, or for Jim Harbaugh's last season at the University of San Diego. Then when Jim Harbaugh went to Stanford, he brought David Shaw over, not just brought him over, made him his offensive coordinator, was with him all 4 years at Stanford. They were together. And then once Jim Harbaugh left to go to the NFL, David Shaw took over the Stanford program and has really did a fantastic job at Stanford. In his time at Stanford, he was the coach from 2011 till he retired in 2022. Shaw recorded a 96-54 record, including 3 Pac-12 championships and 4 Pac-12 Coach of the Year awards. David Shaw was able to win at a very high level, at a very difficult place to win.
Yep, and I think that's really the piece that people can forget is that, but before David Shaw took over, they had gone to 8 bowl games since John Elway was there. Whew. That kind of puts things in perspective.
Yeah.
Like, that's a long time to only have that many bowl games. Jim Harbaugh, he went to 2 bowl games in 2 years and really turned that program around. It was 1-11 before he came in. But, you look at the level of success that Harbaugh had. You look at Bill Walsh. The early to mid 90s at the end of his coaching career, he took over Stanford. 500 record, dead 500 record. And that is a really tough place to win, and it's only gotten tougher. The way that the transfer portal works means that players are leaving schools more than ever before. Stanford can't replace them through the portal. You can't transfer into Stanford.
Nope.
There's like 5 guys in the transfer portal who qualify, and they still might choose to go somewhere else anyway. There's all sorts of those kinds of hurdles that Stanford has been facing. And at the end of the day, it does fall on David Shaw's feet that they have only won 4 games in each of the last 4 years. Haven't won more than 4 games in the last 4 years. But recruiting isn't a part of the NFL game. It just isn't. And David Shaw has been rumored for head coaching jobs for a very long time, has turned down interviews for a very long time because he had a great job. He has a Power 5 school that he was in the top 10 in 6 of the 12 seasons he was there. Why leave Palo Alto when you're the 8th highest paid head coach in the country, ahead of Jim Harbaugh, to take less money with an NFL job?
And there's our 3 minutes right there. And it's a great question. And it's a really good point. A lot of people some people, I should say, view Stanford as like the job. If you value things just beyond pure football, and clearly David Shaw has done that about just the type of people that you're working with and the impact that you can have beyond just football. But Henry, David Shaw, since the news broke last night that they interviewed him yesterday, I get the feeling, just from people's responses on social media and Twitter specifically, that he may be the most polarizing candidate in this. It's not Jim Harbaugh. It's not Sean Payton. I think it's him because you see some people absolutely love him.
Yep.
And then you see some people say, look what he's done the past 4 years. Like you said, Henry, the most wins he's had in the past 4 years is 4. He did that twice. And then the past 2 years, he's had 3-9 records. So you have a bunch of people pointing at that and saying, are you kidding me? This guy who's really hasn't had any success. In fact, he's had only failures in the past 4 years. You're going to bring him on? So let's break down kind of both sides of this argument. You touched on it, Henry. He started in 2011, and from 2011 till 2018, David Shaw had a winning record every single year. In fact, in all but 3 of those years, he got double-digit wins. So he had double-digit wins 5 of those first 8 years. The other years, 2014, he was 8-5. 2017, he was 9-5. 2018, he was 9-4, and of course went to bowl games in every single one of those years. And in fact, he had a 5-3 record in bowl games as well. So some people have questioned Jim Harbaugh, his ability to have success in the regular season at college and at the NFL level, but not being able to get over the hump and win that bowl game, not being able to get over the hump and win that Super Bowl. David Shaw, while he has not won like a championship, 5-3 in bowl games, he's been able to get over that hump. And what's Jim Harbaugh in bowl games? Like 2-6?
Something like that.
So David Shaw, you can point to, he knows how to win the, semi-big game.
Yeah, and it's not just the Cheez-It Bowl that they're playing in. He won 2 Rose Bowls. Again, and to do that, you have to win the Pac-12. So you have to finish first in the Pac-12 North, win the Pac-12 championship game, and then you go play the number 1 team from the Big Ten in the Rose Bowl. That's you would love to see college football playoff experience. I think he had a year or 2 before that started up, and one of those was a Rose Bowl championship season. But there is just so much, I think, to like about what he brings to the table. Because again, you don't have to worry about recruiting. What he's known for is being a good leader, which is what you're looking for. He can build a good staff.
Leader.
He's a CEO type.
Yep.
He's also, to be the head coach at Stanford, you have to be basically a genius.
Yes.
Like, if you think it's hard to get a contract approved by the CU Board of Regents, like, they're voting against coaches here. Imagine the people who run Stanford. To be able to go in there and go through the interviews and have those conversations with the people who run the Stanford.
Yeah.
Stanford.
You know
and
who
have
those
them
type
sign
of
off.
people are? Like Condoleezza Rice.
Exactly. And again, that's part of why, he resonates with Condoleezza Rice, who is that kind of person.
Yep.
With the Penners, who I think Greg Penner has 1 graduate degree from Stanford. Kerry Walton Penner has 2 graduate degrees from Stanford. It's something like that.
Yep.
They have some pretty deep ties, and they will know who a smart person is. And David Shaw is definitely one of them. Again, he's only 50.
Exactly. That's a big thing.
It's crazy.
You know where he went to school?
Stanford.
And he played wide receiver at Stanford as well. So, I mean, he is Stanford through and through. That probably seemed like just an absolutely perfect hire when Stanford was able to make him the head coach.
Yeah.
Especially, you go from Jim Harbaugh, who was doing great things with that program, and then the offensive coordinator is a former Stanford grad. That made so much sense.
Yep.
And so he had so much success when he took over. And one of the things I saw a lot of people say negatively about him was, well, he did nothing after Jim Harbaugh left. Well, he took over the program after Jim Harbaugh left. And then another thing was he did nothing after Andrew Luck left. And sure, did he benefit from having Andrew Luck the first 2 years? He did. He went 11-2 and 12-2 with Andrew Luck. But then Andrew Luck left, and he went 11-3, 8-5, 12-2, and 10-3. So he was still able to have a ton of success after Andrew Luck left. So David Shaw, sticking with the positives right now, an incredible leader. And he's the CEO type that you bring in with an offensive mindset, an offensive focus. So when he was at the University of San Diego with Jim Harbaugh for 1 year, he was on the offensive side. Then, of course, at Stanford, offensive side. So he's an offensive head coach. But, Henry, I imagine if the Broncos hire him, he's going to take that CEO type of approach, not be doing play calling. He's just going to be running the operation.
Yeah, I think that's most likely. He did call plays at Stanford, and so you never know what exactly he sees his role as.
Did he do it every single year?
I couldn't figure that out.
Okay.
He did have the same offensive coordinator for a while, so I'd imagine that at least for these last 5 or 6 years he has. But he just brings so much to the table, and I think it's worth remembering. Like he was the hot up and coming coach. He has been at Stanford since he was 34. So while he hasn't had NFL experience since then, that's because he's been at the same place. Like, he hasn't hit the market. I think he'd be seen as a hotter name for these jobs if he'd been accepting interviews like Jim Harbaugh has. If he was doing an interview or 2 a year, people would be like, oh, yeah, David Shaw, when's he making the leap? But he's just flat out shut him down. The New York Giants were very interested in him a few years ago, and that's a great job. And he said, I have no interest. Again, why would you have interest? There is no rush. You'd be the 3rd or 4th highest paid head coach in the NFL with the salary he makes at Stanford. Things are going well. He still has 20 years of coaching left in front of him. There's no reason to rush out of that job just to rush into a new job that provides some challenges that you might not really like. But again, looking back, he's hired as a 34-year-old offensive coordinator, and he already has 9 years of NFL experience. 4 years as an NFL quarterbacks coach. Like, those are very impressive things to be doing. And what he did at Stanford was very impressive too. And then he resigned in November because things had fallen off. And to me, I don't think winning is possible at Stanford anymore. Like, the way things worked out. And so I'm not really holding that against him. And I'm not saying he's my favorite candidate.
Yeah.
But I do think that when you're looking through all these guys, there really is a lot to like about what David Shaw could bring to the table. And again, like we talked yesterday, how surprised would you be if one of these candidates turns out to be an all-time great head coach? David Shaw, you look at the background, you look at the fact he's only 50, the success he's had, like he totally could be that guy. And I like him a lot better than just taking a flyer on whatever hot offensive coordinator and just see what happens,
Yeah, and you brought up a lot of good points there. And one that I want to start with is he's had a lot of interest from the NFL for many years. Like you said, the Giants were interested in him. But it seemed like 7 to 5 years ago, 4 years ago, it seemed like every time there was a coaching job that was open, every team, nearly every team, I should say, was reaching out to David Shaw to gauge his interest. And like you said, he had a great job. He wanted to live at Stanford, work at Stanford, work at his alma mater, and succeed there. And he was doing that. So he consistently turned not just jobs down, but interviews down. We really haven't had that. He hasn't had that sort of interest the past couple of years, probably because Stanford has not been doing well as well. So that's one thing there. The interest from the NFL has cooled down. You're not seeing him talk to every team this cycle like he's now talking to the Broncos. Does that concern you at all?
No. Like, again, first of all, we don't even know that he's not going to interview for other jobs.
It's true.
I think that he probably will. I think that sometimes there's kind of a groupthink with the interviews. And so as soon as one guy becomes a candidate, everybody else is like, wait, maybe this guy's the guy. Wait, David Shaw might actually want to go. Let's see what this guy has to say, you know?
Right.
I think that's part of it. And again, he hasn't hit the market in 16 years. And I think that if he had been willing to accept other interviews, you know, there would have been a bunch in 2017. There would have been a bunch in 2019. And maybe the fact that he shut all of them down in those 2 years kind of cooled off the NFL interest.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. I like that spin, do I call it?
Sure.
Or just, I mean, it could be spin. It could also be just exactly what's happening. And I like hearing that side. Now let me throw some other things out there. And I actually think that pushing negatives about David Shaw could turn into a big positive for the Broncos. But first, I got to tell you about our friends over at Athletic Greens, where if you get Athletic Greens, it's the perfect way to start your morning. What you do is you take 1 scoop of Athletic Greens, keep it in the fridge, throw it in 8 ounces of water, mix that up, pound it, and what you're getting to start your day off is 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you get your day started right. And the special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, nervous system, immune system, energy, recovery, focus, and aging. And it's all less than a cup of coffee a day for all of those benefits. And they have over 7,000 5-star reviews. So many people like them, not just us. And on top of that, if you go to athleticgreens.com/Broncos, you're going to get 1 free year supply of immune supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. Like I said, we all use Athletic Greens here, and it really gets your day started on the right foot. So check them out, athleticgreens.com/Broncos.
And also head on over to denverhealthmedicalplan.org. What they do is specialize in insurance for people who maybe just aged out of their parents' plan, don't have insurance offered through their employer, and they offer very affordable plans that provide great coverage for people in the Denver area. All of their Elevate Exchange plans include adult dental and adult vision. They offer lower monthly premiums than any plan currently available on the marketplace. They also added mental health benefits for your regular copay. Whole bunch of great perks, and you can hear about all of them if you call 303-602-4912, or you can go over to denverhealthmedicalplan.org. The current enrollment window runs through, 3 days from now. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, through Sunday. So you have until Sunday to sign up. Make sure you get over there right now. Call 303-602-4912 or denverhealthmedicalplan.org.
There we go. And those are 2 ways to get your body right.
Yes.
And David Shaw is interesting because we mentioned it, a connection with Jim Harbaugh in the past, not only at University of San Diego, but Harbaugh liked him enough not just to bring him over to Stanford with him, to promote him. From University of San Diego, he promoted him to be his offensive coordinator. And Henry, here's the thing about David Shaw. They met with Jim Harbaugh earlier this week, a virtual interview, 2 hours long. But we didn't know about David Shaw's interview before they met with Jim Harbaugh. Now, this is speculation, but what if Jim said, well, what if we bring over David Shaw to be my offensive coordinator? And the Broncos thought, well, why don't we just talk to David Shaw later this week to potentially be their head coach? But also, what a nice fallback for him to be the offensive coordinator for Jim Harbaugh in this. I think David Shaw as a head coach would be a very good hire. It'd be a very solid hire. You'd be getting someone as a CEO type that would come in, command respect in this program, in this organization, would be stable for sure. I'm not sure how high the ceiling is. I'm not even saying that the ceiling would be limited. But if you bring Jim Harbaugh in and then David Shaw is his offensive coordinator, oh my goodness, I think that is a home run. That is the dream scenario. Jim Harbaugh has already been my guy at head coach. If you bring David Shaw in, maybe you keep Coach E around too.
Yep.
Wow, now we are talking about an all-star coaching staff. And there may be reason to believe that David Shaw would accept an offensive coordinator position. This was from David Shaw's statement from when he resigned from Stanford this past year. And I got to give a shout out to our guy Jeremy, who's watching us right now. He sent me this little tidbit. David Shaw said, "I'm healthy. I feel good, but 16 years is a long time. 16 years of running a program, 16 years of being responsible for everything, and everybody catches up to you." Maybe that doesn't sound like a guy that wants immediately to be a head coach right away. And we know that he wants to get back into the NFL. He's never been an offensive coordinator in the NFL. Like you said, a quarterback's coach right before taking the jump into the NFL. So maybe he wouldn't even view this as a demotion. He would view this as just kind of changing career paths in a little bit. And maybe no better way to do it than with a guy that he's very comfortable with and knows what it's going to be like working under with Jim Harbaugh. So I'm not even trying to say that it'd be ideal for the Broncos. Maybe it's ideal for both sides.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this all shakes out. Because there's 5 open head coach jobs right now.
Yep.
David Shaw is pretty easily one of the 5 best candidates for those jobs, I think.
As of now, he's not talking with anyone else.
That is definitely true. But to me, I think, again, you look through the names that are out there, there's one coach who has what seems to be a very, very high floor and no reason to think there's a ceiling. There really isn't much of a con for bringing in David Shaw. Again, you can look at the recent record, and I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit more. But there's a lot to like about him, whereas a lot of these guys just feel like crapshoots. So to me, I wonder how exactly he fits in. Because the other thing is, the man's making about almost $10 million a year as a head coach. You know, you look around college coaches, Dabo Swinney, Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, Lincoln Riley, Brian Kelly, Mel Tucker, Ryan Day. Those are the coaches who made more money than him in college football last year. So it would be a pretty significant pay cut to jump down to, even if he's one of the highest paid coordinators, making $4 million, maybe $5 million a year.
No doubt.
That is a step back from where he was. Now, he might be willing to accept that, but
he did resign, so it's not like Stanford's going to pay him this year if he doesn't get a job, though.
Totally. And it could also be that he wants to take a season off. Like, it might make sense for him. He doesn't have the clout of a Sean Payton, obviously, to say, oh, you know what? I want to be a head coach. I don't want to take these jobs. But he could jump back in next year with no consequences.
What if his version of taking a year off is more so taking a step back? And maybe only have David Shaw as an offensive coordinator for 1 year before he says, okay, I'm ready to take that next leap. I kind of had my time off. I wasn't responsible for everything. I was just responsible for the offensive side and not even fully responsible for it because Jim Harbaugh was above me as the head coach. And then he takes that step to being a head coach. From his statement, and things can obviously change since November and when he views what he wants to do this coming year. But from his statement, and just how he has, I think, cooled off a little bit in the head coaching circles for the NFL with what's happened at Stanford the past couple of years, I actually see this as a realistic possibility, a very realistic possibility, and this would be about as good as you could have drawn up before this search even started, getting both of these guys. And Henry, I think Jim Harbaugh and David Shaw, or we can just focus on David Shaw, whether he's the head coach or whether he's the offensive coordinator, would honestly be exactly what this team needs from an offensive perspective as well. You look at David Shaw, what's he done at college? He's ran a pro-style system where it's based on running the ball, and then you have a quarterback that's able to work off of that. I think that's exactly what he would do with the Broncos, and that's exactly what Russell Wilson needs. That's what this team needs, and that's what we saw at the end of the season, what Russell Wilson needs the most. And unfortunately, Henry, Pete Carroll was right. about what works best for Russell Wilson. It's not letting Russ cook and having him be in shotgun and having him throw 40, 50 times a game and trying to have him win MVP by throwing a ton. No, it's having Russell Wilson start with the running game and then base play action off of that. Let Russell escape out of the pocket. Tons of plays, designed running plays for Russ, designed movement plays for Russ, and then having him uncork the deep ball. I'm not saying he can't win MVP with it, but it's not from throwing 40 times for 5 yards a pass. It's having him throw 27 times where he's hitting, like we saw, 40, 50-yard passes every single game. So I think that's exactly what David Shaw would bring, and I think that it'd be exactly what Russell Wilson needs.
Totally. And I think that if you just look at David Shaw and Jim Harbaugh and think they are going to be the ones who try to fix this offense, it's pretty easy to get behind that. Because those are two very, very smart guys. Again, Stanford. Like, I know it sounds kind of dumb to say, like, oh, it's Stanford, so of course they're smart. But they really are that smart as coaches. Like, you look through coaches, I mean, Bill Walsh went through there. Pop Warner went through there. And David Shaw, he won more games than any of them. But it wasn't just Andrew Luck at Stanford either. They've also had, Davis Mills. Yep. Go through there and turn into, he was a first-round pick, right? Or he slipped to the second?
No, maybe even third or fourth.
Okay.
But David Mills, you could argue, with a class of Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, he had the best rookie year. Now, he's obviously flamed out, but I think by the numbers, Mac Jones had a better year, and then it was Davis Mills, right?
He did.
But I mean, Davis Mills is number 2.
Yeah, he was number 2. You look through, I mean, Kevin Hogan was there. Right now they've got Tanner McKee, who's going to be a draft pick as well. The way that they've worked with quarterbacks has been pretty impressive in the past. Obviously, Harbaugh has all the track record that he had with the 49ers. Right. But if you have those two trying to fix Russell Wilson, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think the other side of having him as offensive coordinator is maybe the ideal situation is Jim Harbaugh coaches for 2 or 3 years, kicks everybody's ass, becomes hated, and people want to move on, and David Shaw sitting right there to do the exact same thing that happened at Stanford.
Man, that may be the ideal situation. Yeah. I think 2 years would be too short for Jim Harbaugh to do that. I think something would have blown up if that's the case, and then it's not ideal. But I've talked about it all week. If you have Jim Harbaugh for 4 years, and it's an incredible 4 years, but he ends up flaming out because he grinds on people too hard, and he's gone just like he did in San Francisco, I'll take it right now. Yep. If you have David Shaw behind him to just come in and step in just like he did at Stanford when Jim Harbaugh left, oh my gosh, that'd be perfect. But I don't think that would actually happen, because I do think after next year, after 2 years, David Shaw would be plucked away to be a head coach. But one of the things that you mentioned that's also kind of crazy and great about David Shaw, 50 years old. So whether he's your offensive coordinator, whether he's your head coach, he can be the long-term solution. And we've seen him have a job for 12 years at one place. He's not like Jim Harbaugh, where he's going to grind on people and he's a hard ass and is really going to no, he's going to fit in very well with them.
Yep. And the other way, kind of a weird way of putting it in perspective, I guess, of all these candidates, if Sean Payton's the Broncos head coach, he's going to make the most money out of any of them. I think that's probably fair. I think
Jim?
Yeah, I think Harbaugh's number 2. Sean Payton makes so much money right now. Like, it's just accepted that he would make that $22 million probably. With Harbaugh, it's going to be a big number.
I think Harbaugh's getting 20 plus.
I think he's in that range for sure. But he's only making 7 right now.
That's true.
And so I don't... That jump, if you give him $15 million, there's a good chance he's like, yeah, at the end of the day, that's good enough for me. So I do think those two are pretty close, but I think Peyton gets the most. I think third is David Shaw, though. I think that if you're talking who gets paid more, David Shaw, Dan Quinn, Frank Reich, David Shaw, I think pretty easily, to me, winds up being the highest paid of that group, which doesn't mean everything, but you think about how money works in every other part of the world, and that... It doesn't mean nothing, right?
Yeah.
It shows your worth somehow.
Yeah, and when you think about money, That's one thing that the Broncos could put together,
Yeah.
a dream coaching staff.
They
Now,
could.
obviously, they're probably not going to have Dan Quinn as their defensive coordinator, because if Dan Quinn's staying a defensive coordinator, it's going to be with the Cowboys. One, because he's under contract. Two, because the Cowboys are probably going to pay him whatever he wants. But you could pay David Shaw $5 million to be your offensive coordinator. I don't care. Fans shouldn't care. We shouldn't care what these guys make, because this doesn't count against the cap. This isn't money that's impacting the Broncos in any negative way where fans have to worry about that. No, cap space. There's no cap space for hiring a coaching staff. Pay Jim Harbaugh $20 million. Pay David Shaw $5 million. Henry, the more we talk about it, the more realistic I think this is of pairing these two together. And even if it's not as offensive coordinator, I think he would still be a really good head coach as well. I just think, man, I get to this point and thinking, and some people have said, that's just a dream scenario. But if this could, I don't think this is just a dream scenario. I think it's something that could happen. And now think about if this is a way to recruit Jim Harbaugh. You got money. You can give him more money than Michigan can. You can give more money than any NFL team can. We know that power is up for grabs now. So Greg Penner's made it very clear that for the right head coach, we'll give him pretty much as much power as he needs. I think that's pretty clear. And now, if they're doing this for Jim Harbaugh, they're saying, we'll give you your offensive coordinator as well, the guy who you worked with for 5 years.
They like him too. Well, yeah, sure. We'll hire all of our friends to do that job.
Right.
Makes sense to everybody.
Now, you mentioned we'll hire our friends, people we know, to do this job. Another reason some people on the internet don't like this is they're saying, wait, just because they went to the same school that these people went to doesn't mean that they're a good candidate. That doesn't mean that this is the right way to approach a coaching search. In 2 of the 4 people the Broncos have interviewed this week, there's been clear connections to Stanford. Does that concern you at all?
It doesn't. Like, I get what they're saying, and I think I see how they could see it as, oh, look, they're Stanford football fans. Of course, they like the Stanford coaches, so they're going to hire the Stanford coaches. But I think it's a lot deeper than that.
Okay.
Because they know them. And I think that if Jim Harbaugh is somebody they say, we think that he can turn the Broncos around, well, they know more about Jim Harbaugh than just about probably more than any other ownership group in the NFL. They know more. And if they sign off, that should be
outside
a good
of San
thing.
Francisco.
Maybe. Yep. That'd be the one. But
and San Francisco doesn't want to touch him.
It's true.
So you don't have to worry about them.
Exactly. So you have that aspect, but you also have the fact that, Jim Harbaugh, we've said it in our way, kind of the maniacal, genius, crazy person who you don't really know what to expect. And, there's the quotes where every interaction that he has to feel like he's the winner in it.
Jim?
Yeah. So, like, you're talking to somebody casually going, so there's a winner to that. There's a winner to that. So people wind up not really liking him after a while.
Yeah, grinds.
Having a relationship with Condoleezza Rice, with some of those people, could make that work a little bit better. That could actually just make him a better coach for this team because of those connections. So I think that there's a lot to really like about it, including the fact that just means that they might have a better shot at him. And a better shot at David Shaw as a coordinator, too.
Yeah, those are really good points, Henry. And one other thing we need to touch on regarding David Shaw is a good question brought up by Ryan Thompson in the comment section. He says, you guys actually think that this ownership group is going to hire another first-year head coach? And it's something that we do need to talk about. This would be David Shaw's first head coaching gig in the NFL. Yeah. Why does that not concern you, Hank? And do you think that it will give the ownership pause?
Well, the 12 years as a head coach at Stanford really ease any concerns there.
Yeah.
Because again, I mean, there are definitely differences, but a lot of the differences are things you'd worry about more going NFL to college. It's can he recruit? Does he have the energy level to send the 40 kids that they're trying to get on campus 3 texts a day? And there's that side of things that make things different, but a lot of it really is the same. And you worry a little bit about a college coach coming in and being a little bit too much of a Jim Harbaugh, honestly, being a little bit too hard on the players, and that not really translating as well with adult men compared to 18 and 19-year-olds who you can kind of whip into shape. You can, as our friend Matt McChesney likes to say, reform them. That's how
You're going to use much more harsh words.
Yeah,
after quoting McChesney.
That's how it works in college football, though, is that's kind of part of the job. That isn't what David Shaw's known for, though. And so I think there are a lot of people, including Sean Payton. Sean Payton on multiple occasions has said, why has nobody hired David Shaw? Like, all these NFL teams say we don't know who the good coaches are. We can't find good coaches. Well, throw your money at David Shaw. He's a good coach. He said that multiple times in the past.
Uh-oh, I wonder if Sean's regretting that right now.
I know, maybe.
He's like, shit, they interviewed him before me?
Yeah, but that's the thing, though, is like, he's been a great college coach. I think he's a better NFL coach than college coach, though. Yes.
And also with that transition from college to the NFL, you pointed out some good things. Chip Kelly obviously went from college to the NFL, but he did it you knew he was different the way he did things in college. And he tried to implement those exact same things in the NFL, and it worked for a little bit, but then it really was like, dude, we're not college people. That's what the NFL players were saying. Like, you can't do this. You have to adapt to us. David Shaw's not this guy in college who's doing these crazy, funky things where college kids can buy him, but NFL kids can't. No, he's really running a pro system offense, but that's also kind of what he's got going in college is more of a pro style of the way they do things there too. So yes, it would be his first job in the NFL, but it wouldn't concern me like a Chip Kelly would or something like that. So I do think this ownership group, especially because they know him and have deep ties to him and know how he's run that program, would not be concerned there. Henry, let's do something we haven't done this week. Okay. Let's put these guys in tiers. Tier 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hopefully there's not a tier 5 in this group, but let's do that with the 8 candidates that we know. But first, I got to tell you about our friends over at DraftKings Sportsbook, where right now you can bet on who the Denver Broncos' next head coach will be. Yesterday, Dan Quinn was the favorite. That's before news broke about the interview with David Shaw. We'll see what he's at right now over at DraftKings Sportsbook. But this weekend, if you want to place that money and free bets to bet on who the Broncos' next head coach is, you can place a $5 bet on any NFL wildcard game. And if that team wins, you get $200 in free bets. And boy, this is almost like true free money because, Henry, the 49ers this weekend, plus minus 490. The Buffalo Bills, minus 800. So if you want $200 in free bets, place a $5 bet on the Buffalo Bills to beat the Miami Dolphins. You get $200 in free bets if the Bills win, and that's one of the biggest favored games in NFL history when it comes to a playoff game. So that's as close to a guarantee as you are going to get. So check out our friends over at DraftKings Sportsbook, and every day this week in the playoffs, they are giving you a $10 free bet, meaning if you place a $10 bet and that bet loses in an NFL game, they're going to give you $10 back in free bet, which then you can use. And right now, Henry, I've got the odds pulled up over at DraftKings Sportsbook. Dan Quinn is now even more of the favorite. He's plus 125. The Broncos have not met with Dan Quinn yet, and DraftKings is getting big-time vibes that he's going to be the next head coach. You have Jim Harbaugh plus 330, Sean Payton plus 700, Jim Caldwell plus 1,400, and your guy, Henry, David Shaw at plus 1,500. Man, those are some wild odds from Dan Quinn. If you think that it's going to be Dan Quinn, or even more so, if you think that it's going to be David Shaw or one of those other guys, you can make some money at DraftKings Sportsbook. So head to the App Store now, download the top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app now, and use promo code DNVR when you sign up. And if you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-522-4700 and make sure to see our show notes for details.
I made the bet.
Oh,
I made the bet, and I still
for who? Shaw?
Yeah, I still think Jim Harbaugh is the answer. And honestly, he has pretty good odds too. Like you might as well bet on him. I don't think David Shaw deserves plus 1,500.
I think you're right.
Yep. Yeah, I just put together a little. So it's plus 1,500. Combined it with the Nuggets to take the 1 seed in the West.
Ooh.
Yep. Combined it with the Avs to make the playoffs.
What are the Avs playoff chances now?
They're minus 400, 450.
Oh, okay. I was thinking maybe it's closer like minus 200 since technically they're not in the playoffs right now. But yeah, I mean, Vegas isn't gonna get isn't gonna lose sight of who the Avs
Those two
are.
things make it plus 3,000 though.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great.
Pretty good, right?
Yeah.
I'm proud of that one. I'm proud of that
Yeah.
one. Also proud of some of the awesome bobbleheads that we have here. Do we have any of the FOCO ones down here? Maybe not.
Don't know. We have them floating around the office, though.
So I'll start. Yeah, I can't remember which ones exactly, but we have a bunch of FOCO bobbleheads. We have a bunch of FOCO gear. We've got the sun hat. We've got the blanket with sleeves. There's so many really cool things that you can pick up from FOCO. They've got all sorts of stuff that's just Broncos or Nuggets or whatever branded. The glasses and shot glasses and Christmas ornaments, everything. And if you go over there and use the code DNVR, you can get 10% off all non-presale items. You can do that by clicking the link in the YouTube description or in the podcast description, or just go to foco.com, use the code DNVR.
There we go. Okay, let's do a little reset here at the top of the third, and let's just break down where this coaching process is right now for the Broncos. And we have a nice graphic if you're watching on YouTube just to see it visually where we're at. So the Broncos, 3 days into the coaching search, already completed 4 interviews. Of course, they started the week with the 2-hour virtual Zoom interview with Jim Harbaugh. The next day, they did an in-person interview with Coach E. Then yesterday, they were on the road and they had back-to-back interviews, one with Jim Caldwell in the morning, the other with David Shaw in the afternoon. We have broken down all 4 of those candidates exhaustively this week.
Yes.
Next week, and from what I understand, they're done for the rest of this week. Unless something pops up, they throw another candidate in. They've got 4 more interviews next week, and we know when 2 of them are going to be. The Broncos aren't wasting time. They're going to get the first in-person interview with Sean Payton of any team. There's 3 other teams interested in Sean Payton. We're going to break down Sean Payton and everything that's going on with him tomorrow, so stay tuned for that. But the Broncos are going to get the first conversation with him. The first day he can interview is Tuesday, January 17th. So, Henry, when are the Broncos having their interview with him?
Tuesday, the 17th.
In the morning. They're getting right off the bat with Sean Payton. Then, in the afternoon, they're going to interview Rams defensive coordinator Raheem Morris, who could end up being the number 1 candidate for the Rams job, too, if it's not Sean Payton, if Sean McVay ends up stepping away. And then in the rest of the week, they're going to have interviews with Dan Quinn and 49ers defensive coordinator DeMeco Ryans. Again, they could throw another 1 or 2 interviews there, but 8 interviews. Last year, the Broncos had 10 interviews, and that was a ton. 8's definitely up there. There is no limit on how many guys you can meet with, but 8 is a lot. I think this is probably the group unless 1 or 2 more gets thrown in, but this is what we're looking at. There's a chance, Henry, that in 1 week from today, the Broncos could have their new coach. They could do second interviews later in the week next week and then end up just hiring that person right away. They could push second interviews off till the following week, but I think in 2 weeks from now, we are going to know the Broncos' next head coach. And we're going to break down all of the other 4 candidates a ton next week. And like I said, we're going to start with Sean Payton tomorrow. But Henry, let's put these candidates into tiers. We don't have to rank them 1 through 8 right now. We'll probably do that early next week. But let's break it down into tiers because we've used that word a lot, tiers, but we've never actually officially put these guys in tiers. So let's start with tier 1. Is it as easy as we've been saying all week?
I think so. To me, tier 1 is Sean Payton and Jim Harbaugh. And
to me as well.
I like David Shaw. I think he'd do well, but I do think that you probably have to take those 2 in front of him. I also think the bust potential with Jim Harbaugh is much higher than it is with David Shaw.
Wow.
Because the personality is a unique one. And when you throw that into a locker room, it's 2 for 2 so far, but it does feel like there's some variability there. The ceiling, the track record, all that stuff, though, he deserves to be in tier 1.
You think the ceiling's higher with Jim Harbaugh than David Shaw right now?
I don't think the ceiling is higher.
Wow.
I think that either one of them could be really, really good head coach. Like I said, I think if either one of them has the potential to win multiple Super Bowls in the NFL, I think. I mean, David Shaw's only 50. Like, there's plenty of time. He's going to get his chance eventually. But I do think the odds of Jim Harbaugh reaching that level are probably better.
Okay. And so that's what separates him into being into tier 1, and Sean Payton as well.
Yep.
I mean, he's a Super Bowl champion.
And the case that you could make for David Shaw being in the same tier as him, or, if you want to make the case for Dan Quinn, one of those guys, you're going to have to give up a first-round pick or more. So if you're factoring in that aspect, then who knows? Maybe you could make the case. I still think even with all that, Peyton and Harbaugh at the top, and that's the top tier.
Okay, I'm right there with you. But let's say you are factoring in giving up something for Sean Payton. Are you bringing Dan Quinn and these tier 2 guys up to tier 1, or are you knocking Sean Payton down to tier 2, and then there's only one person in tier 1, and that'd be Harbaugh?
I mean, factoring it in, I still think it's those two at the top.
Okay, and I agree.
I mean, I think that the gap between tier 1 and tier 2 is not as big as it did yesterday. I guess that's I mentioned this earlier, but I think the gap is kind of closing. It seems like more of a race, and this is why, because we'll get there, I guess. But David Shaw kind of fits in.
Okay, let's go tier 2, because I agree with you. You made all the points, and we've kind of just been talking about tier 1 as an obvious one all week. And it's because it is.
Yep.
There is a clear tier 1, and that's not just from what we think. That's from what we're hearing and what I truly believe the Broncos think as well. Tier 2, there's 6 other candidates. How many of them are in tier 2?
I'll put 2 of them there. I think there's 2.
I think I'm between 2 and 3. Okay. To me, my tier 2 is David Shaw. And Dan Quinn. Jim Caldwell is kind of right on that cusp. However, you know what? I'm going to knock him down to tier 3, but the gap between tier 2 and tier 3 with him is not high at all. The reason I'm going to knock him out is just he doesn't have those true connections outside of Peyton Manning, but Peyton Manning isn't sitting in on these. Peyton Manning doesn't have the connection with John Elway that he has with these guys now. So I'm going to put him in tier 3, but Jim Caldwell, he still has a shot to get this job. So tier 3 isn't like you're out of the race. But Dan Quinn, I think not only the connection with George Payton, but I think when they meet with Dan Quinn next week, the owners are going to be blown away with Dan Quinn. They're going to love that he's respected. They're going to love just how good of a leader he is, and they're just going to love being around him. So I do think that he's going to have a really good interview. And we've talked about David Shaw ad nauseum today. There's a reason that they interviewed him yesterday, and it's because he has a legitimate shot.
Yep, and I totally agree.
Is it those 2 as well?
Yep, it was. And Jim Caldwell was the one I was deciding on also. I think that, again, there's just... I think what separates tier 2 is the floor. I think that when you look at the top tier, it's more so the ceiling. It's the floor for tier 2, where you say, is David Shaw going to be a good coach in the NFL, a top 10, top 5 coach in the NFL? I don't know. But I don't think he's going to be bottom 10. You know, I think that you can expect to get a pretty average coach at worst. And I think that Dan Quinn's track record suggests something fairly similar. And so that's, to me, why those 2 are in my tier 2.
There we go. I love it. Okay, now how many more tiers do you have? We've talked about half of the candidates.
Yep.
Does that mean there's going to be a tier 3 and tier 4 for you? Or tier 5?
Yeah, I'll separate them.
Okay, so how are you going to separate them?
I think tier 4.
So let's reset really quick where we're at. The guys that we have left. DeMeco Ryans, the San Francisco 49ers defensive coordinator. Another defensive coordinator with Rams, Raheem Morris. Then we also have Coach E with the Broncos. And then we also have, who am I missing right now?
Caldwell.
Caldwell, yes, of course.
Yeah, and this isn't going to look good on a chart. Like, I don't think visually it looks nice, but I think tier 3 is just Jim Caldwell.
Fair.
I think that tier 4, what separates them is that they don't have experience, and they could be good coaches, but they don't really have the floor. Is it true.
I mean, to be fair, his experience was over a decade ago.
Yeah.
Does that kind of hurt him?
I don't think so. I think that still helps him. I think more so what helps is what's happened since. You know, I think the fact that he goes through that, we talked about it a little bit, but Mike Shanahan kind of takes him under his wing and tries to show him what he can learn from what happened with Tampa Bay, which, again, you know, you have 1 good season out of 3. Josh Freeman's your quarterback for all 3. I don't necessarily look at that and say, yep, that guy was terrible and he's never going to, you know, it's a pretty average result.
Yeah.
He goes under Mike Shanahan's wing, goes and flips to the offensive side of the ball under Kyle Shanahan. I think that you look at all that and say he could be a good candidate. And I think if you wanted to just go 2-2-2-2, he would be in that tier 3, but I still think he's tier 4.
Okay, fair. And I will put him in that tier 3 just because he does have that experience. But within that tier 3, I think Caldwell's above him.
Yeah.
Then he's below him. And then, of course, in tier 4, it's not that these guys are bad candidates or bad coaches. In fact, if this were my ranking of them, D'Amico Ryans and Ejiro Evero would be probably higher up on here. And man, when I think of D'Amico Ryans, and we're going to break him down next week, I just get Mike Vrabel vibes. And Mike Vrabel, I think, is a Coach of the Year candidate every single year, really, that he's been a coach. And so I just think that's a guy that you have to give a good, hard look at. But neither of these guys have previous head coaching experience. To me, it's not something that I absolutely have to have. I think for this Broncos organization, though, it's something that you really need to have. And these guys haven't had it at any level, college or the NFL, whereas David Shaw has had it at the NFL level. So, so the cutoff for me, man, I guess Jim Caldwell could get this job. So they could go down to tier 3 in order to hire a head coach here.
I think it's definitely possible. And I'm just curious what they think. You know, I think it's easy for us to say, like, Jim Harbaugh, Sean Payton, track record. Like, what we get to see is what's on Wikipedia, and they get to actually go talk to all these guys for a couple hours.
And that's why I think it'd be naive to say it's tier 1 and done for them.
Definitely.
And that's why they are opening up to these people. And also, they're much more about the person and leader. They don't Henry, you know how many offensive guys with no experience they're interviewing right now?
None.
Zero. Yeah. And that's typically, the football guys, that's who they really want to bring in is the young offensive geniuses that can come in and be Sean McVay, be Kevin O'Connell, be Matt LaFleur, be these type of guys. And the Broncos, Mike McDaniels, the Broncos are saying, no, we care about who you are as a leader first, and then X's and O's later. In this interview process, according to Mike Kliss this morning, it's George Paton, Greg Penner, and Condoleezza Rice.
Yeah.
One of those people is has been in the NFL working for many decades. Condoleezza obviously knows football, but she hasn't been in an NFL building, working NFL job for multiple decades. She clearly knows her stuff, though. And then Greg Penner, he's been in an NFL building for 4 months. And I mean, same with Condoleezza Rice, but I mean, these are people where you pretty much half of the people in there are new to the in-depth football. These interviews, I think, are much more about leadership and CEO and personality qualities than they are, okay, sell me on how you're going to scheme up the Chiefs right now.
Yeah, and I think that's the way it should be, because I don't think they need a head coach who can go out there and run all of the, run the offense or run the defense or do those sorts of things. What you really want, and honestly, what Jerry Rosburg did so well was he was in the meetings, he's seen a lot of football, and he said, I think this works, I don't think this works, and he's there just to kind of help out. You don't need him to run things. And I think that's what all these candidates point to. And if you're looking just for a leader, I think that this is a pretty good group of people to be picking out who should be a good leader. I mean, the Waltons run Walmart. They have hired some pretty important people in the business world, some people who make a lot of money, and they have gone through this process over and over again. Condoleezza Rice, does she know what a good leader looks like? Well, she was fourth in line to be president of the United States, so that would point in the direction of having an idea about leadership. So I do like that this is the group that's handling this. And I think we mentioned before, is a little bit scary. Yeah, it's definitely a little bit scary that they don't have football experience, but that'd be a lot scarier if they were searching for, the $4 million a year head coach who's coming from an offensive coordinator. Right. You're picking between Nathaniel Hackett or Kevin O'Connell. Or if you're picking through those sorts of guys, it's an issue. But when you're saying we want to give somebody $15 million a year, potentially more, to go lead this franchise the way it should be led, and we'll give you this much money to build the staff around you that you need to be successful, this is a good group to be picking that head guy who can build everything from there.
I like it. I like it a lot. All right, let's hit our comment section and hit the one comment we have right now from Denver Rivals. Says, hey guys, I just want to say I'm so excited for Saturday, January 21st for our Avalanche watch party featuring Denver Rivals at the DNVR bar. Looking forward to partying with y'all and showing all the things our program and the Alzheimer's Association will offer in 2023. My comment is giving y'all props for your hard work and roasting CBS Sports. If you look at one of their NFL draft articles, they list Melvin Gordon as a Broncos free agent going into the offseason. Talk about someone not doing their research. Either way, hope we get Harbaugh in as head coach. I was at the game this past Sunday and felt all of our mantra through the game as well. Where was this all season? Let's hope for Miles better Broncos football in 2023 and 2024. Go DNVR, support DNVR Rivals, and look forward to the event on Saturday, January 21st. Love hearing that we've got that event planned with you.
Yep.
And, of course, you're doing great things with Denver Rivals. Really appreciate you. And another vote for Harbaugh. Got to say, the comment section's been giving a lot of love to Jim Harbaugh. And got to give shout out to our guy, C. Fillmore 72. He says, leave a thumbs up for the DNVR fam. We would really appreciate it. Henry, I've loved this pod. It's been a blast, and I think we might have some comments on the YouTube as well. Let's hit them super quick. Okay. First one, Jared says, how much say will Russ have in the decision?
So typically in this situation, I would have said like, oh yeah, they'll kind of keep him informed. They'll say like, what do you think? They won't really care what he says, but they'll keep him up to date with what's going on.
Make him feel valued.
Exactly. At this point though, I don't even know if he's really getting all of that. I think if he called and asked like, hey, what's up? Somebody would tell him.
Yeah.
But I don't think they're going out of their way to ask him, and I don't think his opinion matters at all.
Like I said, there's 3 people sitting in on these interviews. Like in the past, when they hired Nathaniel Hackett, when they hired George Payton, when they hired those 2 specifically, we're talking about 6 to 10 people sitting in on these interviews, with some also coming in via Zoom like Joe Ellis did last year. We're talking about a big room of people where then, sure, maybe you bring Russ in, Zoom him in for a bit of the interview, or you just call him right after. With this, though, we're talking about only 3 people in here. I don't think he's getting much say. And when Russ was asked about it last week, he did not force himself to be in those. He was asked, he said he'll just do whatever they want me to do. So I really don't think that he's actually getting that much of a say. And after a season like this, I think he understands.
He has to, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of obvious that the franchise has more on its mind than who does Russ think is going to be a good head coach.
They've literally said that too in public. George Payton and Greg Penner.
Exactly. So that's why I don't think that this is much of a conversation even, really.
Yeah.
It's just pretty obvious to me.
Now, maybe after doing these 4, George calls him this weekend and just gives him a heads up where it's at. They're not going to be doing that with Garrett Bowles. They're not going to be doing it with Pat Surtain. No, they're going to be doing it with one player, if they do it to one player at all, and it would be Russ. All right, another super chat from Zachary. Our guy says, just wanted to show some love. Keep it up. Thank you so much, Zachary. And I can't stress this enough. We really appreciate everyone for tuning in, whether you're live, whether you're tuning in on iTunes on the podcast side. It means a ton, especially now that we're in the off season. And unfortunately, in the past 5 years, the offseason has been more important than the regular season. So actually, this is the important season now. And Cody also chimes in and says, late to the show, so gonna go back and restart. Make sure that you like the stream. Best coverage in Colorado. Thank you so much, Cody, as you're tuning in every single day. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We appreciate every single one of you. It's the off season. That means Friday pods are back. So we're not done for the weekend. We will be back tomorrow noon, live on YouTube, and of course, dropping on podcast form right after. Thank you all so much. We're going to break down Sean Payton tomorrow. We've got quite a conversation, and we're going to give our playoff picks. So stay tuned for that. See you tomorrow.